I would like to begin this morning with a very deep and radical illustration of something that I want to expound on. Ogres are like onions. They stink? No. Yes. Oh, they make you cry? No. Oh, you leave them out in the sun and they get all brown and start sprouting little white hairs? No. Layers. Onions have layers. Ogres have layers. Onions have layers. You get it. They both have layers. Not everybody likes onions. The Bible is like an onion. It stinks? No. It makes you cry? Sometimes. You leave it out in the sun and it gets all brown and starts sprouting white hairs? I don't know. I've never done that. I hope not. Layers. The Bible has layers. It has an inexhaustible number of layers. Not everybody likes the Bible. That's true. It's too bad. My hope this morning is to peel one or two layers off of the Word so that we can see how deep it goes with the help of the Spirit. And as I sort of go through the layers, I'm going to mix metaphors here. We're going to kind of go in a circle. Sometimes preachers try to build a foundation and go layer upon layer to a point. Well, we're going to kind of go in a circle. I hope today that you will join me in this lap around Scripture. Jesus said in John 14:15, which is the basis for our little trip that we're doing now called Love Me Do, he said, if you love me, keep my commandments. And we spent last week breaking that down. That is the why of this little series. If you love me, keep my commandments. It's a motivation of love. We do what Jesus says because we love him, not just because he says so, not just because he's the Son of God, but why? It's that agape love. This is that love that's completely given over to. That's why we should keep his commandments, because we love him. Love is what motivates us to keep. When it says keep, it means to guard, to protect, to keep a treasure is kind of the idea. It's not simply obey. The result of you keeping these things is obedience. But as you keep them, as you protect it from other things influencing these commandments, the better you'll be able to do them. I recently heard the story of a lumberjack who was hired by our lumber company. He'd been out of work for a long time and really needed the work. So he begged the foreman, please let me go to work for your company. So he said, okay, I'll give you a shot. So he spent days chopping trees with an axe. This was like an old school, axe sort of lumberjack, right? And he chopped for days. He worked through his breaks. He worked through his meals. Because he wanted to work so hard and to support his family. About 3 or 4 days in, the foreman calls him in and says, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to let you go. Why? I've been working really hard. I've been chopping all through my breaks. The other guys are taking breaks and they're eating, and I've been chopping all day long, every day. Why am I not why? Because you're not producing. I don't understand why. Well, the foreman thought for a minute, let me see your axe. And he looked over the axe and kind of ran his finger over the blades. He goes, I get it. While the other guys are taking breaks, they're not just eating and hanging out, they're also sharpening their axes. You've been chopping with a dull blade. So that's why you haven't been producing. This is kind of the picture of, if you love me, keep my commandments. We have to keep, we have to protect, we have to hone, we have to sharpen this thing of love that drives us to keep his commandments. Otherwise, it gets dull and we become unproductive. Anybody been there? Anybody feel there right now? You don't have to raise your hand. That's fine. If you don't, that's good. If you do, then you're in the right place at the right time. God has you here for a reason, to hear me, which means you're hurting. If God wants to use me to get to you, you're in deeper trouble than you might realize. Today, we're going to do an overview of the what. What are the commandments? What is this thing that we're supposed to keep? And it in itself has a few layers. So the first part of our circle, of our lap, of our going around this thing, is this idea of, go ahead, Noah, is who is speaking, first of all, and what difference does that make? Why is there a picture of Bruce Lee and Yoda and John McEnroe on the screen? Let me explain. Jesus is a rabbi, and another word that was used to describe a rabbi was a master. And master not just in the sense of, okay, I'm going to cooperate, not like master in the sense of boss, in that I work for you and we have an agreement and I work so many hours and you pay me a wage. We're talking master, all right? Go back to Bruce Lee. So I didn't mean like why you screwed up. I meant like why I was making a point. You did great. Awesome job. The first picture on the left. On the right is Bruce Lee, who many people might recognize. On the left is a guy named Ip Man, I-P-M-A-N. That's the guy who taught Bruce Lee. You've probably never heard of him unless you've seen the movies. But you've heard of Bruce Lee, but not Ip Man. This guy was a master, and he had disciples. Bruce Lee is amongst the most famous of his disciples. But for decades, he had disciples who gave up everything to go learn his particular form of martial arts. He was a master. People came and begged to be his students, all right? Yoda's a little bit more identifiable, only because we've seen the movies, right? Yoda was a Jedi master, right? He trained Jedi. People would go to learn to become what he was. They wanted to be a copy of what Yoda was. He was a master. John McEnroe, really? I put that there because I used to be really into tennis. I used to play tennis. You can't tell by looking now. But I used to play tennis in middle school and in high school, and I really, really enjoyed it. And if I had the chance at that time, I was into tennis when you had people like Boris Becker and Steffi Graf and Michael Chang and sort of that, when tennis became popular for that brief little bubble of time. It kind of went away. But that's when I was into it. And it was at the end of John McEnroe's, towards the end of his career, that Jimmy Connors sort of era. And if I had the chance, I might have become one of his students. I would have thought of him as my master and me as his disciple and listen to everything he said and swing the racket the way he swings and do my footwork the way he does his footwork and serve the way he serves, because I would want to be like him. Now compare that master idea to that of a mascot. A mascot is really the complete opposite of a master. A mascot is something that you might rally around. We just had the Super Bowl, Seattle Seahawks over the Denver Broncos. Some of you hate that, some of you love that, some of you are like, who cares? But these are two animals. What is a Seahawk? There's no such thing as an actual Seahawk, is there? They've done the research, but we know what Broncos are. But anyway, we're like, I'm a Seahawk, I'm the 12th man, and you paint your face and there's birds on things, and we rally around a Seahawk or a Bronco or whatever team or whatever sport you want to do. But you're not really one of them, are you? You rally around it. It's almost like a good luck charm. It's like, I identify with that. I'm a part of that thing, but you're not on the field, are you? You're not on the court, you're not on the ice, whatever the thing is. Preachers can become mascots. We can see, I'm going to follow, I go to this church, and this is the pastor there, and I'm a part of that. Yeah, but does he even know your name? Like if you walked up to him and he said, hey, how's it going, Bob? He'd be like, nice to meet you. What's your name? I've been going here 15 years. He's really just become a mascot to you. You have no relationship with him. He's not your discipler. He's not your rabbi. He's really not your master in that sense. Jesus is the one speaking. He is a rabbi. He is a master. Now, rabbis, masters, did have students and they had disciples. Well, what's the difference? Because sometimes we use the words interchangeably, a student versus a disciple, and there is an element to truth that they're both similar, but here's the difference. A student, go ahead and put the next slide up, Noah. A student wanted to know what the rabbi knew. A disciple wanted to be what the rabbi was. See, somebody who is a student, and I'm totally ripping this off from somebody else, by the way, just to give credit where credit is not due. Somebody could be a student of a rabbi. You could be, you would go to hear Jesus, for example, when you had the time, but you weren't one of his disciples. You was somebody who was a disciple, gave up everything to go and follow and become what the rabbi was, not just a student. Do you see the difference? Jesus calls disciples. He doesn't call students. So the one speaking here, the one saying, if you love me, keep my commandments, it's very important to keep in mind that he is a rabbi who calls disciples. A disciple is supposed to become a master someday. Does that freak you out a little bit? Does that make you a little nervous? Makes me nervous, and I'm up here doing it. I don't know why you guys are here. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Self-esteem trip. It's not counseling time. It's Bible time. Thank you very much. A disciple is supposed to become a master. Paul said, "Follow me as I follow Christ." He said to people like Timothy and Titus to raise up others, to give them this teaching so that they in turn will teach others. And yes, there are different levels of responsibility and different roles. Not everyone's called to be a pastor or an elder or a whatever. But as his disciples, we are all called to disciple and to be discipled. Not just to be students, but to be disciples. That's a huge, huge difference that's really still sinking into me. Here's another way to think about it. A student would be a consumer, whereas a disciple would be a creator. We're talking about consumer versus creator. I have an iPad. I've had an iPad forever, and I love using it, but it is primarily designed to consume content. I can go to websites, I can go to YouTube, I can do all kinds of stuff to take in information. It has a limited ability to create things, but that's not how it was designed. It was designed to consume. Something like a laptop is really designed to create. It's more powerful, it's more flexible, it has more parts, it can do more things. How are you, which one of those best reflects what you are? Are you a consumer? Do you come to church? Do you come to Jesus to consume, to receive stuff? Or do you come to participate, to create, to give into what's going on? Do you go to church to fact check the study? Some people will go to a church, and it's important to go to a church that has good doctrine, sound teaching. I'm not lessening that at all. But for some of us, that's where it stops. I go to that church because I've checked the doctrine and I'm going to hear good things, and that's what it's really all about. That's not really what it's all about. Neither is the hokey pokey. That's not really what it's all about. Just had to clarify that. It's about creating. I go to that church because they have sound. I go there because they have the right methodology. I like the way they do small groups. I like the way they do children's. I like the way they do whatever the thing is. It's not about that either. That's consuming. That's not creating. That's not contributing. Or another way to think about it is education versus equipping. Are you more interested in being educated or equipped? I want to go there and learn the Bible. Learn the Bible. This whole section that we're going to do today, I wanted to do for hours. You wouldn't want that, trust me. But I am so into this book, and I'm going to share with you some other things that I've kind of been going through recently related to this book. But it's not just about being educated. We have turned church into a place to be educated, and that's important, but it stops there. We have created a generation of education and consuming when it's supposed to be equipping and creating. And I so want to get beyond educating and consuming. I want to be a part of what Jesus really has in mind as a rabbi training his disciples. So it's important to understand that Jesus is the one who's speaking. He is a rabbi. These were his disciples. They understood this dynamic. We really don't quite get it. And I want to refer you to this book called Sitting at the Feet of Rabbi Jesus, How the Jewishness of Jesus Can Transform Your Faith. These two authors, Anne Spangler and Lois Tverberg, Tverberg, really do a great job of sort of breaking up and getting us 21st century Gentiles, for the most part, into a first century Jewish mindset and what all that means. So great. We have 2 copies. You can check those out from our library. So Jesus is the one speaking. That's leg 1 of our circle. Leg 2, next slide. Jesus' source material. What are his commandments? Where do they come from? We're supposed to keep it out of love. Well, what are we talking about? Well, first of all, we're talking about the Bible, aren't we? And in Jesus' time, that meant what we call the Old Testament, the Tanakh, the Torah, the history books, and the poetic books. And it was really this area that I'm about to get into where I had my own first aha moment with Jesus. Back in college, early 90s, I had spiritually grown up in church in middle school and high school, but it wasn't until I got into college that God's word itself really came alive to me. And I didn't know it could come alive to me again, as it has just recently, in a whole different way, which is I'm kind of looking forward to getting to that. Let me share you how my first aha moment kind of broke up. And this is where we get into layers. The first layer has to do with sort of looking at the Bible from a librarian's perspective. All right, how many books in the Bible? Say it, come on. 66, very good. How many in the Old Testament? 39. How many in the New? Do the math. 27, very good. It's 66 books written by how many people? 40-ish. We're not quite sure, but 40, at least 40. On how many continents? 3. And they are Europe, Asia, and Africa. So Egypt, the Middle East, and then up into Europe there. In how many different languages? 3. Very good. Hebrew, Aramaic, which is related to Hebrew, and Greek. 3 different languages, 3 different continents, over thousands of years, 40 different authors, yet it's one book, isn't it? This is this realization, and then the ways that this is demonstrated are what made up my first aha moment. And it's seeing this book as it is. People will argue, you can't use the Bible to prove the Bible. It's like, well, you don't really know what the Bible is, do you? That's like saying you can't use an encyclopedia to prove an encyclopedia. Anybody have those in your house growing up? My grandma had like the World Book encyclopedia set, 1975, and it was the 80s, so it was a little bit out of date. But that's like saying you can't use an article in the C book to prove a point in the W book. Well, of course you can, because it's a collection of articles from different sources in different places, and it's history, and it's poetry, and it's documentation. You can absolutely use the Bible to prove the Bible because it's actually a library of books. That's a very important thing to understand, to get, and it will help you make sense of things and help you explain things to others. So one layer that we're peeling off is this librarian layer for seeing the Bible as it is from that perspective. Another layer is seeing it from a spiritual or supernatural perspective. And that's where this acronym for me comes in handy, because it helps me, it kind of bridges the librarian dynamic, because we're talking about why we can trust the Bible. So while that might seem librarian-ish, it's really, there's a spiritual component too. And a quick and easy way that I'm just going to kind of overview to remember why we can trust the reliability of the Bible is this acronym MAPS. And I've shared this a few times before. The M stands for manuscript evidence. I think there's some pictures on the next slide. There is more manuscript evidence for the Bible than any other ancient book. There's a sample of the Hebrew text on the left. There's a sample of the Greek text on the right. When it used to be that the oldest copy of the Old Testament we had was from 900 AD. Boy, it would be nice to have something older. Guess what? They found some. 1940s, they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are 1,000 years older than the copies from 900 AD. And when they compared the two, people would assume, well, it's been 1,000 years, so there's got to be differences, there's got to be changes, it's got to be completely different, right? Wrong. Nearly identical. After 1,000 years of being handwritten copied, it was nearly identical. And the nearly differences are minor differences of spelling of names and places, nothing that impacts anything major at all. The New Testament, we have more copies of New Testament books and scraps and pieces than any other ancient document that exists. There's more manuscript evidence for the Bible than there are for the histories of Julius Caesar and Rome and Greek and all that stuff. Way more. And they're all consistent. They all nearly agree with one another. It's completely reliable from a manuscript evidence perspective. The A is archaeology. Manuscript evidence, archaeology. And as an example of this, next slide, this is a picture of what's called the Cyrus cylinder. If you've read your Old Testament, the name Cyrus might pop up, especially in the books of Isaiah and Daniel. The book of Isaiah, written 150 years before a man named Cyrus came along, God names him by name. He talks about Cyrus 150 years before he will come. Cyrus was the king of the Medo-Persian Empire that you see in Daniel, and he was one of the ones who sent a group of Jews back to Israel that had been conquered to start rebuilding. This cylinder is a document about that event. It's written from Cyrus, giving permission, recording the event. Archaeological evidence. Boom. One of thousands of examples. The P in maps, next slide, is prophecy, which I just sort of alluded to one already with Cyrus. There's so much of this that's a whole day in and of itself. But it's not just vague, general prophecy. There are some prophecies that are mathematically precise. Like God says, okay, you person, when this event comes, start counting days because that many days later, this event's going to happen. We're talking about numbers of days, numbers of years, right? And it happens. Daniel chapter 9 is the primary example of that, but it predicts that when the order is given to restore and rebuild Jerusalem will be 483 years until Messiah the Prince comes. Well, when you look at history, you know that March 14th, 445 BC, that order is given. Boom. Count the days, count the years. 483 years later, Jesus presents himself as Messiah riding on a donkey with people shouting, Hosanna in the highest. Mathematical, exact prophecy. And Jesus holds us accountable to knowing that because when he gets to the top of that hill and looks at the city, he cries and says, if you had known this your day, today, if you had known this your day, but because you didn't know, stuff's coming. Couple of examples of prophecy. The S in maps is statistics, which is related to prophecy because when you look at the prophecy and do some statistical probabilities as to how could that happen, what are the odds, literally is the question, it's mind-blowing. Just to take 8 very basic prophecies about the Messiah, what he would come, what he would do, or what would happen to him, 8 of the over 300, and smarter people than me, way smarter, did the math, and they estimated that for this particular set of 8, the chances were 1 in 10 to the 17th, if I remember correctly. Was it the 17th? Maybe it's like the 130-something. I didn't write it down. It's a big old honking number. It's so big that it goes like, some say that if something has the odds of 1 in 10 to the 50th, it's considered impossible. It actually is a bigger number than 1 in 10 to this. Anyway, to relate to that number, they say you take the state of Texas and you bury it in silver dollars 2 feet high, and you take one of those and mark it with a red X, and you chuck it out into Texas and you stir it all up, and you give somebody one chance, blindfolded, to pull out that silver dollar. That's the statistical probability of one person fulfilling 8 of the 300 prophecies. So it's stuff like this that shows me not just a librarian's perspective, but a supernatural perspective that this is from God. And another way to put it is it's an integrated message system. This one book is integrated together. That's the Holy Spirit. That's the oversight, that's the inspiration of God's Holy Spirit speaking into the writers of these 66 books over thousands of years, 40 different people, 3 continents, 3 languages, to make an integrated, interconnected message system that comes from outside of our time-space bubble. Only God, who is supernatural, who exists outside of our reality, could speak into our reality this truth, this book. It's trustworthy, it's reliable, and all of this is what makes it authoritative. Why do you trust the Bible? Why do you read that ancient book and let it determine your morality? Well, because it comes from God. Really? Prove it. Okay, I will. Maps. There you go. Shut up and believe in Jesus. I don't know. Don't say the last one. That's not quite as effective and compassionate. You don't see Jesus saying, shut up and believe. Well, maybe you do. Anyway, that'd take more study. I'll get back to you on that. Another layer is that this book is approachable and practical. There was a time when this book was not approachable, when you had to go to the church, you had to go to the priests who read it in its language at the time of Latin, for example, and if you didn't read Latin, you couldn't read the Bible. You had to trust somebody else's thing. Now, we have it in our own language. Now, you can have a complete Bible study library on your phone. You can have thousands of pages and hundreds of volumes of research and original languages and dictionaries and pictures, wha-bam, on your phone. Pretty awesome. It's approachable. It's practical. How is it approachable? Well, we have it in the language, but it's also just easy to relate to. The Bible refers to itself as bread. It's the bread of life. It's the word of life, right? It's man does not live on bread alone, but by every word. It's comparing itself to bread. We all get bread, right? I love me some bread. Jess baked bread last week, and we hadn't baked any in a long time, and I was like, oh, dude. Which I'm convinced that most things, especially bread, are just a conveyance for butter. Yes. Can I get an amen? The reason bread exists is so that you can eat more butter. Yeah. As my arteries will attest to. No, we all get bread. The Bible compares itself to water, the washing of the water of the word. Jesus says, come unto me all who are hungry, all who are thirsty, and you will drink and you will be satisfied, right? The Bible refers to itself as honey. So here's my little experiment. Crack out that honey. Take that shot. Go ahead right now. Do it. Bust it open. And while they're doing that, if you want to, just write down, or you can turn to Psalm 119. Psalm 119. It is the long one that I just turned past. How did I miss that? Psalm 119, verse 103. Psalm 119, 103. Yes, stat. Can do. I got a box of it up here. Psalm 119, 103 says, how sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. So, Jordan, describe one word, what was your experience with that honey packet? Delicious. Good. Who else had some? Sweet. Yes. Don. Natural. Good. Who else? Lois?
Yes, I find it delightfully satisfying.
Delightfully satisfying. Beautiful. I just thought that was, what? Soothing on the throat. Yes. It's thick, isn't it? Who else had some? Anybody else? Did I throw any more out? Who wants some now, right? It's sticky. Yep, sticks to you. The Word of God is like that. That's such a cool experience, I think, to have it be that approachable, that relatable, because pretty much everybody knows what honey is like. It is sweet, it's satisfying, it's sticky, it's thick, it's soothing. Those are all things that the Word of God is. I just love that approachability. It's practical. While you're still in Psalm 119, this is one of the first 4 sets of Bible verses that I ever memorized, was Psalm 119, verses 9 and 11. Not 9 through 11, but 9 and 11. It says, how can a young man cleanse his way or keep his way pure? By taking heed according to your word. Your word I have hidden in my heart that I might not sin against you. You having trouble sinning against God? Here's a tip. Hide God's word in your heart, because there's not room for both. Either sin will live in your heart or God's word will live in your heart. They can't coexist. So it's practical. We're going to be in Psalm 119, verse 105. We'll talk about this psalm in just a second, also the whole thing. But Psalm 119, 105 says, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. When you're walking in a dark world, what do you need? Light, so you can see where you're going. We live in a dark world. We need some light. And the light, it not only works for us, but it also works as a beacon to others who don't want to live in darkness anymore. And that comes through the word. Go way in the back to 2 Peter 1. If and you want to. 2 Peter 1, starting in verse 2 says, grace and peace be multiplied to you in the knowledge of God and of Jesus our Lord, as his divine power has given to us all things that pertain to life and godliness, through the knowledge of him who called us by glory and virtue, by which have been given to us exceedingly great and precious promises, that through these you may be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust. So we have the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. Through the knowledge of him, great and precious promises. Where do you find these things? Whoosh, right here in these pages. One more, just for grins, from a practical perspective, is Hebrews 4:12. It says that the word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword, which, if I can say it this way, means that the Bible cuts through all the crap. Can you say that in church? I just did. The Bible cuts through all the doo-doo. It just slices and dices right through it both ways. But I'm stuck on it. How can, and I really don't think it should be whoosh, cut through the crap. Let's get right down to it. That's what God's word does in a loving, gentle, yet hacking way. That's what it does. And another layer that I think we overlook is that the Bible is very creative. I mean, we're maybe used to thinking of it in terms of apologetics, and it's historical, and maps, and all that's great stuff, but this is an extremely creative document that we hold in our hands. We read several verses from Psalm 119. It is the longest chapter in the Bible. Psalm 119, as some of you may know or may not know, is an acrostic poem. It's the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and I think there are 7 or 8 verses per letter, and it doesn't repeat itself the whole time. Each of those chunks, the first chunk begins, every line, begins with aleph, with A. So it's A, and then B begins each sentence, and then C begins each sentence. Imagine doing that just in English. I know we got 26, but take out a few, because we have some extra letters anyway. Why do we have the letter K? I don't know. Because you could use, the letter C. I know it starts with Corby, but I could spell it with a K, right? Because any letter that has 2 sounds, cut it. That's my, Deb, get on that. Start teaching that in school. Okay, good. But I digress. It's all 22 letters. What? They do it anyway, right? Okay, sounds good. You don't need the letter Q, do you? Quiet, K-W-I-E-T, quiet. What's with the, anyway. That's another soapbox. That's right, Quayway on Netflix. Anyway, Psalm 119. It's this amazingly creative acrostic poem, and it never repeats itself. It's like saying Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet is written in what's called iambic pentameter, which means it has this rhythm of 5, of 5 dum de dum de dum de dum de dum, of these 5 patterns. The whole play is written in that pattern. That was a huge accomplishment. It would still be a huge accomplishment, a creative accomplishment. And you have stuff like that in the Bible. Not just, to me, that's amazing. In the Bible, you have things like they're types or patterns or foreshadowing. You have events that are separated by hundreds, if not thousands of years, yet they're interconnected in this very creative way. I love that about the Bible. God is such a creative being. I mean, look at us. We're all so different. He's that creative. Looking at human beings, if you look at our genetic code, there's so much variability that you could, if this, maybe I'm sure it's possible, but if you wouldn't get the same kind of human except for twins. That's a whole nother thing. But we have so much variability in our genes that you could produce, I think it's like 1 to the over 2,000th power different combinations of genetic code human beings before you repeated yourself. That's a lot of creativity. That's a lot of that's amazing. So the layer of creativity, I think, is an awesome overlooked layer. So Jesus' source material was God's word. It's organized like a librarian would see it. It's spiritual, it's supernatural in origin, it's creative, it's practical, it's approachable. Now, what did Jesus teach? And here we're coming back to who we talked about, but we're going to talk about what he taught. So that's the third leg. He taught, and we'll explain some of these things in a minute. Most of what Jesus taught, as you read the Gospels, this might sound almost heretical, but it's not. Most of what Jesus taught was not new. If you read rabbinical teachings of the day, you're going to see he echoed a lot of what was being taught by other rabbis at the time. The way he taught wasn't even radically new. He used parables. Guess what? So did everybody else. Remember the parable of the sower, of the 4 seeds? There was this thing called the parable of the 4 hearers, or the style of the parable of the 4 hearers, and rabbis would take that same pattern, but use different things. Jesus is most famously known for using the sower of the 4 kinds of seed. That wasn't a new concept or a new teaching. He used something which to me doesn't lessen it at all. It means he's very approachable, doesn't it? Jesus uses stuff, he used things that they understood at the time to communicate to them, to relate to them. So most of what he taught wasn't new. The way he taught wasn't new. The thing that set Jesus apart is he reconnected something that had become disconnected. He reconnected the purpose and the person behind the path. Let me explain that. This is my second aha moment. And as I explain it, some of you guys might be like, duh. But it was huge this week for me. As I was listening, I had read a book, and then I was curious about more from this author, so I listened to some of his teachings, and it stirred up something in me that hadn't been stirred up in a long time. My second aha moment. Let me explain some of this. There's the Hebrew idea called halakha. And I don't speak Hebrew, so I'm probably trashing these words. The word halakha means the path. It means the way in which we should walk. Halakha was what we would call the Torah, the law, or more specifically, the 613 commandments that are in the law. Okay? Those are the halakha. Those are the path. Those define for us the way in which we should walk. Rules are good, right? Without rules, we have chaos. Without boundaries, we go crazy. Anybody who has kids knows this, and the boundary is usually the bedroom door. Go crazy in there, don't come out. This is your boundary. This is the rule. I don't know. Not my kids, because they're older now, and they make noise. So halakha was the path, all right? Haggadah, sounds like Haagen-Dazs, so think ice cream if you want to. That's totally fine. Was the why, was the spirit behind the law, behind the rules. Jesus reconnected the Haggadah, the why, the purpose, back to halakha, the path. Those had been separated. And an example of that is this. Jesus is teaching. That's what he does. And he says to them, you've heard it said, you shall not murder. That would be the halakha. That would be the path. That would be the way you should go. What did he do then? But I say unto you, here's the more unique part. Here's the reconnecting. Did I say murder? Okay, I didn't want to confuse him because that would be creepy. That if you have hatred for your brother, you're guilty of murder. That's the heart behind it. That was a huge reconnect, the halakha and the Haggadah. Because think about it like this. Has anybody committed murder today? Like literally killed anyone today? You're like, the day is young. Whoa, okay, calm down. Wait till we get in the car and get in the ride home. No, you might say, you know what, I'm spiritual, I obey the law, I haven't killed anyone today, I haven't murdered anyone. Is that really the point? To go through day after day, haven't murdered today? No. the commandment, thou shalt not murder, becomes significant and important and something to obey when you are faced with the desire and the opportunity to murder someone. Road rage, whatever the thing is, and I know we can speak light of it, but I don't know if you've been in that moment of passion and emotional overwhelming when you literally want to take somebody else's life. In that moment, when you realize, remember, thou shalt not murder, and you obey the command, that's when you're obeying it. Not just when you walk around every day not murdering. Same thing Jesus did with adultery. You've heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. I say unto you, if you look at somebody with lust in your heart, you've already committed adultery. So it's not that every day when I don't cheat on my wife, I'm obeying that commandment. It's if, when, God forbid, I have the opportunity to do so, that I don't. That's when I'm obeying the commandment. It's this reconnect that blew people away. And for me, seeing Scripture with that other layer is what's blowing me away. Because I was blown away by the path. The path is my first aha moment. Holy crap, this book is awesome. Look at the path. Look at the connectedness. Look at all the fun, the prophecy, and the stuff. And that's awesome. But there's more to it than that. The more to it is this idea of kavana, which I have mentioned once, which this book actually gets into all of these concepts. Kavana has to do with having an awareness of God and an understanding of the purpose of God in what we do. It's both of those things together. And it's actually, when you get all three of these things mixed up, it's like, that's when you're doing it. So when people, to me, get hung up on a particular church methodology, they're stuck on the path, or what they perceive as the path. When people get stuck on a particular emotionalism, they're stuck in the spirit behind it, but they're missing any kind of structure. You got to have both of these things. It's like a good church will have this kind of study and this kind of group. Says who? A good kind of church produces disciples. That's really what it boils down to. Just as the body without a spirit is dead, so too is the word without the spirit. It's dead. You need the spirit as much as you need the word itself. Another great way Rabbi Jesus talks about it is go to John 15. We started off in John 14. Go back to John 15. And again, you're going to be hearing more about this Halakha, Haggadah, Mele Kaliki Makkah, much more in the near future. I'm going to read to you John 15, verses 1 to 8. And remember that this is a part of the same context as John 14. It's Jesus speaking to his disciples at what we call the Last Supper. John 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 are all encompassed in this same event. He says to them in John 15:1, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, so that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. Now, what helps me, we don't really use the word abide very much, do we? Now, for me, when I see the word abide, maybe it's part of some weird dyslexic thing I have, but I see the word abode, which is a little bit more familiar than abide, but maybe not much more. An abode, what's an abode? Like your house is your abode, right? It's where you live. It's where you function. It's where you dwell. It's your home, all right? So when I see the word abide, it's the same concept as an abode, all right? Abode in me is what he's saying. Abide in me, abode in me, and I abode in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit in and of itself unless it abodes in the vine, neither can you unless you abode in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abodes in me and I in him bears much fruit. For without me, you can do nothing. Thank you. If anyone does not abode in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered, and they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abode in me, and my words abode in you, if you love me, keep my commandments, you will ask what you desire, and it shall be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you have a food pantry. That's a good thing, but that's not what he says. By this my Father is glorified, that you have a rock and worship team. It is, isn't it? By this my Father is glorified, that you have a regular men's or women's Bible study. It's a good thing, but that's not what he says. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit. So, or in this way, you will be my disciples. Not students, not consumers, not being educated or educators, but disciples, creators, equippers. This is the difference. And then on top of all of this stuff, my mind goes to John chapter 1, where it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So the Word is this book, but Jesus is also the Word. And he sort of said it just now when it says, keep my commandments, keep my word, keep Jesus. Protect him, guard him. Don't let other stuff come in and mess with that and make him dull in you, because then you will be less or unproductive. And I don't know about you, but I don't want that. Now, while I said Jesus didn't teach really anything radically new or different, or the way he taught was very similar, he did have something unique to him. Jesus' command was this: love one another. That was his command. You can read more about it in 1 John chapter 2 in particular. John's like, this is not an old commandment, but it's a new commandment, but it's kind of an old commandment too. Love one another. It was, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Yes, but Jesus says, you guys, my disciples, you need to love, you need to be completely given over to one another. That's scary. I don't want people to know me. I don't want to know other people. Yeah. Gross. People are messy. People are like honey, but they're like bad honey. They're sticky. And anyway, they have botulism. I don't know what it is. They're bee vomit. That's what people are. Sorry. Totally messing up my whole point. Jesus' command is to love one another. That's what he wants. So, kind of tie all this together. Rabbi Jesus said to his disciples, if you love me, keep my commandments. So my questions for you to answer are these. Is Jesus your master, or is he your mascot? Is he something you just rally around, and that you want to rally around with other people and go to the game and rah, rah, rah? Or is he your master? Is he your Ip Man? Is he your Yoda? Is he your master? Are you a student, or are you a disciple of Jesus? Remember, a student wants to know what the master knew, but a disciple wants to be what the master was. Are you a consumer or a creator? Now, it might be easy to, in your head, well, of course I'm a creator. Of course I'm a disciple. Chew on this, because the more you chew on it, the more you'll get to the root of the thing, and that's when change and transformation can come about. Are you an educator, or are you an equipper? Do you go around and tell people, this is what the Bible says? Or do you equip and demonstrate to them, this is what somebody who follows the Bible does? Because we got way too many educators in the kingdom of God, Bible beating everybody around them, instead of doing and equipping what it says. If you love me, keep my commandments. That's the what. Next week, we're going to talk about the how. It's like, man, I want to do that. I want to do this. Again, every week, I'm talking to me. You guys just happen to be here while I talk out loud to myself. How do we do this? How do I do this? We're going to talk about that next week, and it's summed up in the Holy Spirit. So be here for that.